Scott here. You can find more of our videos. Just search Gospel for Africa on YouTube. I want to talk very briefly about Gideon and how God called this young man who in his own eyes was nothing and a nobody. But this is what God does. When we read through the scriptures, God is always calling the insignificant people, the least likely candidates. And God does this so that, as he describes to us in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, consider your calling, brethren, how that not many mighty and not many noble and not many wise after the flesh have been called. But God has chosen the weak and the base and the despised and the foolish things to bring to nothing the things that are, for this purpose, that no flesh should glory in his presence. And when we look at the church today, there's so much glorying among men in the presence of God. Big names and big ministries, and it's like we've got superheroes in the church, and everything that we see in the world, we also want that in the church. And so we follow after these names and these ministries and these charismatic preachers, but it leaves the average person like you and I feeling worthless. Like, what are we going to do? What can we contribute? Because we're not like that. We're not eloquent, and we're not charismatic, and we maybe don't know the Bible that well. And so we kind of feel that we're insignificant. This is how Gideon felt. But let's just read this. It tells us that the Israelites had done evil in the sight of the Lord, and so the Lord hands them over to the Midianites for seven years. And the Midianites overwhelmed them, and basically the nation of Israel are now reduced to living up in the valleys, trying to eke out an existence, trying to grow a few crops and have a few flocks, but no longer are they in the vast plains and enjoying their crops and their flocks being able to graze on those plains. And so whenever they did have a little bit of produce, the Midianites, Amalekites in verse 3, and people from the east would attack them. They would come up in such great numbers that they were uncountable. And they would invade the land and they would consume everything. And it says in verse 6, Israel was so severely weakened by the Midianites that the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. Isn't it amazing that we've also got to get to that point where we're so tired of eking out an existence, not enjoying the blessing of God and the fullness of God and life in the Spirit, and eventually we're just so desperate we cry out to God. And they did. And God visits them. But God doesn't visit the greatest in the nation of Israel, or the wealthiest, or the most educated. Have a look at who he comes to. Verse 11. The Lord's angelic messenger came and sat down under the oak tree in Ophrah, owned by Joash the Abiezrite. And he arrived while Joash's son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress so he could hide it from the Midianites. And the Lord's messenger appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, you courageous warrior." In the King James, "you mighty man of valor." And Gideon jumps up to look around to see where the mighty man of valor is, but God's speaking to him. And I want to say to you, you are the mighty man or the mighty woman of valor. You are the courageous warrior. You're the one who God called. And it's not about who we are and what we have. God didn't call you because he saw anything in you, as some modern preachers would tell you. God called you in spite of. And God takes the things that are not and he calls them to be. And God didn't call you because you had something to offer him. He just wants you to be a vessel that he can fill by his Spirit and live through. He will make you the courageous warrior. He doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And so when you're called of God, he gives you a ministry. He gives you a gift. He gives you a purpose. And you got to take that which he has given you and fulfill it to his glory. Gideon says to him, "Pardon me, but if the Lord is with us, then why has such disaster overtaken us?" Maybe you're in that place. Well, if the Lord's with me, then why are things like this? Well, why are we being reduced to this, and why are we suffering, why are we in such difficulty, and why do we have to struggle every day, and all the questioning if God is with us. Where are his miraculous deeds? that our ancestors told us about. And it's the same with us. We question, where's the Lord? Where are the signs and the wonders? Where are the miracles? Where are the great things that are taking place? Surely God just isn't with us because we don't see evidence of it. The Lord's abandoned us, Gideon says. And the Lord himself, he turns and he says to him, you have strength. In fact, I want to encourage us this day that if you are born again, you have strength because you have the Spirit of God. And if God be for us, who then can be against us? Now you go and deliver Israel from the power of the Midianites. Have I not sent you? And I think of Matthew 28, go into all the world, Jesus says. But before he commissions them, he says, all authority, all power in heaven and in earth has been given to me. On that basis, I'm sending you. You're going in my name. You're going with my authority, with my power. Church, it's time for us to arise. But maybe we're like Gideon, and he turns and he says to him in verse 15, but Lord, how can I deliver Israel? Just look. My clan is the least in Manasseh, and I am the youngest in my clan. That's the excuses we come up with. But God called David, who was the least. God called Moses, who also had excuse. He had a stammer. But God's calling you. And it's not about what family you've come from, what you have or what you don't have. It's about who's called you and who's going to be with you. Because that's what God said to him. He said to him, I will be with you and you will strike down the Midianite army. And so I want to encourage us. We've been called and we've been sent by the authority and the power of Jesus Christ. And if God be for us, who can be against us? And it's amazing how Gideon doubts and then he puts out the fleece and then he does it a second time, and we're just like that. We're no different. We also struggle in this area. But as the church, we've got to, by faith, rise up and believe that we've been sent by God. God says, go call the army. 32,000 arrive. He says to them, tell those who are fearful, you can go home. 22,000 depart. He's left with 10,000. God says to him, they're too many. He reduces it to 300 men. God's just showing us here. He doesn't need great numbers or charismatic people. It's not about us, it's about him. And he sent those 300, and we know the account, how God undertook for the nation of Israel, confused the Midianite army. They began to fight with one another and then fled. Church, it's our time to stop waiting for some great charismatic leader. And even during this time of Corona lockdown, you've been stirred in your spirit. You've begun to exercise the gift that God is calling you. And I want to encourage us to continue in that attitude. Stir up the gift of God. God has called you. God has sent you. God will equip you. It's time for you and I, like Gideon, to arise in faith and to believe God at his word. And God will take the nothing and he'll bring to nothing the things that seemingly are. And so let's trust God and let's see what God will do through our seemingly insignificant lives.